Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and bow, and go out to the open country to hunt some wild game. Genesis 27:3.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Food for the Plot. If you're new here, my name is Garrett, and this is an outdoor podcast where we talk about land, wildlife, stewardship, conservation, hunting, and the deeper meaning behind why we do what we do out here. Today, we're going to be going further into Job 12:7-10 and the idea of creation as a classroom. Let me read the verse first. But ask the animals, and they will teach you, or the birds in the sky, and they will tell you, or speak to the earth, and it will teach you, or let the fish in the sea inform you. Which of all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this, and his hand is the life of every creature and the breath of all mankind? Man, that hits different when you're someone who spends time outside. Just recently, I found my very first shed antler. I've been looking for sheds for as long as I can remember, and until this year, I had never found one before. I've made shed traps, put miles on my boots, and I found quite a few deadheads, but I've never found a shed. Just a week or so ago, I was out at the farm putting up some spring trail cameras and putting fresh batteries into my deer feeder, which I have out in one of the prairies. I could hear God telling me to take a stroll and look for sheds, but to be honest, I was kind of ignoring him. I was thinking to myself, why would today be any different? I've looked and never found one, so why would I find one today? Finally, I went along with it, hopped on the deer trail, and went about 200 yards through the prairie along a rub line that the bucks tend to travel quite frequently. I turned around at a thick sapling that had a massive rub on it and started to work my way back. I could hear God saying to get off the deer trail, so I did. I went about 5 yards off the deer trail and had only walked 10 yards or so when I spotted it, my very first shed. The feeling was unexplainable. It was one of those moments when you rub your eyes because you're sure you're just seeing things. I walked up to it, and sure enough, it was a big antler. Looking back through trail camera pictures, I realized that it came from a buck that I call No Name, who I actually shot at and missed with my bow during November, a moment that absolutely crushed me. But this very moment, finding his antler lifted me up. I had no idea No Name was still hanging around. For reference on size, I scored the antler and it scored 60.5 gross. Times that by 2, and then I figured in an average 16-inch spread, which brought his estimated score to a solid 137 inches gross. To me, that's a giant. Had I not listened to God in that moment, I never would have found it. In his hand is the life of every creature and the breath of all mankind. Finding that shed is a moment that I will never forget. I could hear God talking to me. I could feel God guiding me. Sometimes, well, most of the time, it's very hard to hear him talking to you, but realistically, how often is he talking to us and we just don't hear him? Or how often do we just choose to ignore him? If you really think about it, God didn't just create the outdoors for us to enjoy. He created it to teach us. His creation, the outdoors, is a classroom. So today, we're going to break that down. What does it mean that creation is a classroom? What can we actually learn from it? And how does that apply to what we do, whether that's planting food plots, hunting, or just being outside? Romans 1:20 tells us, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." Before we get into the outdoor side of things, we've got to understand the context of Job. For those of you who don't know or haven't read Job, or who have read it and just don't understand it, Job is going through it. He's lost everything. His wealth, his family, his health, and his friends are basically trying to tell them that he must have done something wrong. And in chapter 12, Job responds with something powerful. He basically says, you don't need to be some expert or philosopher to understand God. Just look around you. That's where verses 7-10 come in. He points us to animals, birds, the earth, and the fish, and says they all testify to God's power. That's huge, because it means that understanding God isn't just something you get from sitting inside. It's something you can learn by stepping outside into his creation. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I think that's something we've lost a little bit in today's world. We're so disconnected from the land that we miss the lessons that are literally all around us. Now, let's talk about what it actually means to learn from creation. When Job says, ask the animals, he's not saying they're going to speak to you in words. What he's saying is to observe them. If you spend enough time in the woods, you start to notice patterns. Over the years, simply from observation, I've noticed that the deer use different trails from year to year depending on what crops are being planted around the farm that I hunt. Like most farmers, they rotate the crops back and forth between corn and soybeans. On the year corn is planted, the deer will use a particular trail that comes into a corner, and during the next year when the beans are planted, they'll use a trail that comes in 50 yards away. Crazy, but pretty cool to realize that all simply from pure observation. You learn when deer move. You learn how weather affects them. You learn how they use cover, food, and water. And over time, you realize something. There's order to it. It's not random. That points us back to the Creator. Lesson 1. God is intentional. Nothing in nature is accidental. Food plots don't grow without the right conditions. Seeds don't sprout without soil, moisture, and sunlight. The same goes for wildlife. Everything has a purpose and a design, and when you start managing land, even on a small scale, you begin to see how everything connects. Genesis 1:24, and God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so. Lesson 2, patience is required. This is a big one. Back to finding my first shed. This whole 20 plus years striving to find my very first shed, I was not patient at all. But it did teach me a lot of patience. Or like last year, waiting on the rain to come so that I could replant my food plots that had failed. It took a lot of waiting, and it taught me patience, yet again. It even took me 3 years until I harvested my first deer. Patience. You plant a food plot, you don't see results overnight. You put in habitat work, you might not see payoff until the next season, or even years later. Nature teaches patience, and that carries over into daily life. Galatians 6:9 tells us, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Lesson 3. Provision comes from God. At the end of the day, we can do all the work we want, but we can't make it rain. Just like my failed food plots last year, they failed because of the drought. They didn't succeed until God made it rain. We can't control the weather. We can't control everything that happens. That's a reminder that God is the provider. He makes springs pour water into the ravines. It flows between the mountains. They give water to all the beasts of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. The birds of the sky nest by the waters. They sing among the branches. He waters the mountains from his upper chambers. The land is satisfied by the fruit of his work. He makes grass grow for the cattle and plants for people to cultivate, bringing forth food from the earth. Psalm 104, verses 10 through 14. Let's make a personal connection from the field. This is where it gets real. Because if you spent time hunting or working land, you've experienced this firsthand. Think about early mornings in the woods. The grass is covered in frost. You can hear birds beginning to chirp as they wake up. You breathe. The air is crisp. It's quiet, still. You're watching the sun come up. And in those moments, there's something different about it. You feel closer to God. Not because you're doing anything special, but because you're surrounded by His creation. Psalm 46:10 tells us that. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." Every year, I feel like I put in more work in preparation for deer season than I did the year prior. November of 2025, there was one hunt in particular that I'll never forget. I had just gotten home from my animal science class. I wasn't even sure that I'd have enough time to hunt. In a rush, I skipped the no-scent shower, threw on my camouflage, grabbed my bow, and headed down to the ladder stand that I had overlooking one of my food plots. I took along a spray bottle of Tink 69 and a scent wick. Once down in the plot, I sprayed the scent wick and placed it on a nearby honeysuckle branch. Once up at the stand, I sprayed that bottle of Tinks into the air, and with only about an hour and a half to hunt, I settled in. Sitting there, figuring that nothing would happen, I heard a twig snap. There, at about 30 yards away, stood one of my target bucks, No Name. He had just come out of nowhere. Rather than coming straight into the food plot, he decided to wrap around the honeysuckle bush where my scent wick was. This was my opportunity. But the question was, do I grab my bow first or get the camera turned on? I decided on the latter and turned on the Tacticam. I grabbed my bow at about the same time he rounded the bush, and that's when my Tacticam began to malfunction. Deer can hear so good that he could hear the vibrations coming from my Tacticam. He became very edgy and started to walk further into the food plot. In a mad dash to draw my bow, I bumped the tree stand and we locked eyes. Now it was a stare down, and I knew that he knew something wasn't right. I had lost the advantage. He took another step, and I drew my bow back. He stopped and was yet again looking right at me. I rushed the shot and watched my arrow fly about 6 inches above his back. As he ran back towards where he had come from, I watched his big, beautiful rack fade into the sunset. I quickly nocked another arrow in hopes that he would return, and wouldn't you know it, about 5 minutes later, I heard a twig snap directly behind me. I settled into the tree, trying to remain stock still. I could hear the deer walking right underneath my stand, and as I slipped my eyes down, I realized that it was not No Name at all, but a small little 6-point. It was so frustrating. We've all been there. You put in the work, you finally get the opportunity, and you miss. But even in that, there's a lesson. Humility. James 4:10 tells us to humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up. You realize that you're not in control. Finding No Name's shed this year was awesome. It tells a story. It reminds you that life keeps going, that not everything depends on you. And honestly, it makes me appreciate that miss even more. The story of No Name continues. When Job says that creation teaches us, he's not just talking about survival or patterns, he's talking about God's character. Look at storms. Look at the changing seasons. There's power there that we can't control. Psalm 147, verses 17 through 18, he hurls down his hail like pebbles. Who can withstand his icy blast? He sends his word and melts them. He stirs up his breezes and the waters flow. God is detailed. Look at how specific everything is. Different plants for different soil types, different animals adapted to different environments. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care, and even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Matthew 10, verses 29 through 30. God sustains life. In his hand is the life of every creature. That's a reminder that everything depends on him. So how do we actually apply this? Number 1, spend time outside with purpose. Next time you're hunting, try leaving your phone at home. Or next time you're checking trail cameras, take the opportunity to just sit down against a tree for 15 minutes and breathe in that fresh air and look around you. Not just for recreation, but observation. Pay attention. Number 2, slow down. We're always in a rush. Nature forces you to slow down, and that's where you start to notice things. Psalm 23, verses 2 through 3. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Number 3, connect it back to God. Pray in the stand. Take time to reflect. Don't just see nature as cool, see it as evidence of the Creator. Number 4, use it as a teaching tool. Share it with your family. Ask your buddy that's down in the dumps to go hunting with you. Share your story and your connection to God from your time in the woods. If you've got people around you, use the outdoors to point them back to God. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 through 7 says, "These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up." At the end of the day, Job 12, 7 through 10 is a reminder that we're surrounded by lessons every time we step outside. The animals, the land, the seasons, they're all pointing back to God. The question is, are we paying attention? Jesus tells us in Revelation 3:20, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me." Jesus is waiting on you. Do you know Jesus? I asked Jesus to come into my heart back in 2006. I was 6 years old and at Awanas. Even then, at such a young age, I knew what I was doing and I was proud to ask Jesus into my life. I was baptized when I was around 12 years old and again, proud to be baptized. Most of my life, I've known Jesus, but I don't think it really sank in until on one particular hunt back in late 2021. I was home on leave and my dad and I had just finished building a pop-up boat blind for his duck hunting boat. My dad, my mom, their yellow lab, and I went up to the lake and went duck hunting. It was a beautiful hunt. My mom was wearing a pair of my dad's sunglasses looking like a bad you-know-what, and my dad and I ended up doubling up on an awesome mallard pair, a drake with double curls and a hen with a band. During that hunt, I was wearing a brand new hat with John 3:16 on it. "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life." It was on that hunt that it really hit me. If not for Jesus' ultimate sacrifice, there'd be no hunting. There'd be no fun moments. There'd be no point in living because all we'd have to look forward to would be an eternity in hell because of our sinful natures. It is because of Jesus' ultimate sacrifice that we can live and live life to the fullest. Jesus loves you, even if you don't know him. Do you want to know Jesus? Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment for anyone listening who feels something on their heart right now. If you're listening to this and you feel like God's been speaking to you, maybe through this episode, maybe through your time in the outdoors, and you've never made the decision to follow Jesus, I want to give you the opportunity to do that right now. The Bible makes it simple. It's not about being perfect. It's about surrender. Romans 10:9 tells us, "If you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." You can pray this in your own words, but if you don't know what to say, you can follow along with me. Jesus, I know that I am a sinner, and I know I've fallen short, but today I choose to turn to you. I believe that you died on the cross for my sins and that you rose again. I ask you to come into my life, forgive me, and make me new. I give my life to you. Help me to follow you and to live the way you've called me to live. Thank you for saving me. In Jesus' name, amen. If you just prayed that, that's the most important decision you'll ever make. I appreciate each and every single one of you guys. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along with Food for the Plot. And if you're also following the YouTube channel, Kicking Feet Outdoors, you'll see a lot of this stuff play out in real time. I appreciate you guys listening, and I'll catch you on the next one. Stick with it.